the European leaders jumped at the opportunity to come here to Washington because they wanted to show solidarity with President Zelensky of Ukraine, which was critically important, especially after the disastrous meeting in Anchorage last Friday. So I do think the European leaders are very nervous, given the change in the tone and the statements coming out of Donald Trump's mouth over the past several days, where he was first interested in a ceasefire and said that Russia was going to have severe consequences if he didn't come out of that meeting with a ceasefire. And then he did a reverse, a complete 180. So I would agree that the visuals were better today than they were certainly on Friday. And I do think that there was the impression of progress, but unfortunately, I fear that it's more of an illusion of progress because, as you point out, there are several areas of very significant disagreements. First and foremost is the issue of a ceasefire. Yeah. I cannot see that there would be any type of serious negotiations underway unless there's some cessation of hostilities, call it a ceasefire, a truce, a pause, or whatever. You would have to have something like that. Then the issue of what territory might be ceded or granted to Russia, and then also the security guarantees. So I think there's a lot of general sort of, impressions that there is progress being made, but these details are going to be very, very complicated. It's going to take time. And I do think a lot of those European leaders in the White House today understand just how complex this is, far more than Donald Trump does.
Director Brennan, I want to play some sound for you of President Trump over the last few weeks talking about a ceasefire and get your reaction on the other side.
It's going to be a good meeting, and we'll go a step further. We'll get it done. I'd like to see a ceasefire very, very quickly. I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire.
And he did indeed walk away without any form of ceasefire. As a former spy chief yourself, what happened? Because up until Thursday, he was saying, even Friday when he was going to Alaska, saying, I want a ceasefire, period. And then he got in the car with Vladimir Putin. They drove a little bit, and then all of a sudden his mind changed. Former KGB agent talking to Donald Trump, and now his mind changed. What do you think happened there?
Well, I think, first of all, Donald Trump is quite intimidated by Vladimir Putin. I think he admires Vladimir Putin's strength and his will in terms of prosecuting this war. It's very unfortunate to say. But also, I think he realizes that he's not going to move Putin off of this position. Putin has thought through these issues for many, many years. And I think he was determined to get to Alaska and to lay down the law, basically, with Donald Trump. And so I think Donald Trump gave in to him. And so that's why he changed his position, claiming that a ceasefire is not important. Well, I'm so glad that the German Chancellor Merz and the French President Macron, in that session in the Oval Office today in the White House, said that, yes, a ceasefire is important. We need to be able to move forward with that in order for there to be some type of trust generated that any type of negotiations will be serious. Again, I just think Donald Trump doesn't understand just how complex and complicated this issue is.
I want to go back to point 3 on your list, Director Brennan, which were the security guarantees that would potentially be offered to Ukraine by the United States. You have Steve Witkoff, the president's special envoy, sort of foreshadowing yesterday on Fox News what that could look like, saying the United States is potentially prepared to be able to give Article 5 security guarantees, but not from NATO, directly from the United States and other European countries. I had a thought that apparently was not that novel because it was shared by former Ambassador McFaul, who tweeted this today. Instead of Article 5-like security guarantees for Ukraine, what about an Article 5 security guarantee, NATO membership? Why that distinction? And can the United States actually guarantee that level of security to Ukraine without NATO membership and without juxtaposing it with conditions from Russia?
It's far, far different to have obligations for mutual defense under a treaty, the NATO treaty that the U.S. has signed on to, as opposed to some type of statement that a Donald Trump might give as far as security guarantees. And that's why I agree totally with Mike McFaul that if you're going to give Article 5-like assurances or guarantees, why not actually do that? Now, NATO membership takes a unanimous vote of all the NATO members, so I do think there's some time there that is needed. But I think it's very, very unlikely that either Russia will allow there to be the types of guarantees that the Ukrainians want. And the Russian Foreign Ministry just came out today with a statement saying that any type of European troops on Ukrainian soil is totally unacceptable. So I do think there's a big, big gap right now between what the Russians might be willing to accept, what we are able to offer, and the Ukrainians basically are in the middle of this.
Director, I was listening to you, and I love the way Alicia put that point on the table. It's like, why not the whole thing, right? But at the end of the day, Zelensky doesn't want to be in a position where he's going to rely on Donald Trump to protect him. So this idea of having, Article 5 like trust or relationship exclusively with the U.S. without NATO, again, for me, just tells me what the man doesn't know about the job he's in, and the individual sitting across the table from him, nor understands the individuals that are in the room with him. You have world leaders at the White House today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, French President Macron, UK Prime Minister Starmer, Italian Prime Minister Meloni, Finnish President Stubb, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and NATO Secretary Mark Rutte. You've got this cross-section of very important European allies at the table. The front of the story is obviously the Zelensky, Putin, Ukraine, Russia dynamic. What other dynamics do you think are at play here with those individuals at the White House, here in Washington, beyond what we see on the cameras? How do you think they're trying to refashion, if you will, these conversations by being here?
Well, I think that the Europeans are most interested in making sure they send a very public signal of their commitment to Ukraine's integrity and sovereignty. And they're going to signal that not just to a Donald Trump, but also to members of Congress, because there's still a fair extent of support that the Ukrainians have inside of Congress on both sides of the aisle. And it's critically important that the United States continue to defend Ukraine's territorial integrity. So I do think the dynamics underway right now, it's at a very critical point where Donald Trump really does seem to be taking on more and more of Vladimir Putin's positions on Ukraine, because Donald Trump wants a settlement. He is not really concerned about what the impact will be in terms of if there is going to be some type of capitulation to Russia on Ukraine. The Europeans, though, know exactly and can feel the hot breath of Russia on their necks, because they know that Vladimir Putin is intent on continuing to move westward in terms of trying to just regenerate the Soviet Union's reach and hegemony. So I do think that there is a lot of concern right now in many quarters, and there's a division of views, I think, right now in the United States and certainly in Congress about what exactly some type of settlement would look like if we're ever to get there. But believe me, we're nowhere near a settlement at this point, because there's just so many details and so many issues that still need to be worked through.
Director Brennan, one of the things you learn very quickly when you're around microphones is that they're always possibly on. I'll tell you a hot mic moment we got from President Trump earlier today for you.
I think he wants to make a deal. I think he wants to make a deal for me. You understand that, as crazy as it sounds?
Why would Putin want to make a deal for Donald Trump? I guess we're trying to parse through it, and obviously this isn't something, maybe the president's playing 4D chess and he wanted us to hear this. Doubtful. What do you think he's talking about here?
Well, whether it's a hot mic or just an open mic, I think Donald Trump continues to show that he is really a very unserious statesman. The fact that a president of the United States sits in the Oval Office and meets with a foreign leader, President Zelensky, and then disparages his own predecessor, Joe Biden, calling him a horrible, corrupt president. He undermines the credibility of the United States, not only his own credibility, but the credibility of the United States itself, because he has demonstrated that he is willing to just change course on a whim.